Today is Epiphany Sunday. And I said that to somebody the other day and they went, "What's Epiphany?" Well, the definition in the dictionary goes like this: a sudden intuitive perception or insight into the reality or essential meaning of something, usually initiated by some simple, homely, or commonplace occurrence or experience. We sometimes call this the light bulb moment, the aha moment, when everything starts to make sense. The word actually comes from, you guessed it, the Greek. And it's epi, which means toward, and phanein, to be revealed, to be visible, to shine light, to be seen. Toward the light, toward understanding, toward a revelation. And in the Christian year, Epiphany is that Sunday that we celebrate when the Magi came to Jesus, when they went toward the light. They followed the star so that they found the Messiah. This is Matthew's first post-birth story. And unlike Luke, who extrapolated and went on, Matthew doesn't talk about shepherds. Matthew goes straight to the Magi, these wise men of the East. All of the Gospels have a certain audience that they were written for and the time that they were written. And Matthew spoke primarily to the Gentiles. That means people who were not Jewish. And those were the people he was trying to reach with the message of Jesus. And he starts right here by saying that the first people that he recognizes as coming to Jesus, the first people who come to pay homage to Jesus, are not Jews, but Gentiles, these Magi. And what do we know about them? Well, from Matthew's Gospel we learn a little bit, but there is more that is extrapolated from other texts of the time. First thing we know is they were probably not kings. So we three kings, well, maybe not quite. They were more likely wise men, astronomers, astrologers, people who paid attention to the stars. And there were probably not three. This is just an assumption that was made based on the fact that we are told that they bring three gifts. They were not named at all in Matthew, although there have been popular lore that has named them. And some of this comes from a text that was written in the 500s CE, Common Era, or AD. And in it, it says that Balthazar was one of the kings, and he was the king of Arabia. Melchior is the king of Persia, and Gaspar as king of India. But again, this was not mentioned in Matthew. Matthew's Gospel is the only account where we hear and read about these wise men. They were not Jewish. And this is an important part of the story, because we have to recognize that the people who heard this story from Matthew, first of all, would have been horrified that these people from the East, these pagans, these non-Jews, would be coming to see the King of the Jews. After all, they had been told for centuries, the Jewish people, that this was their Messiah. This was their king, not for anybody else. And here was Matthew telling them that a pagan worshipped. This would have been absolutely anathema to them. And yet, this is where he starts. They started watching and following a star, or maybe a star, or maybe a group of stars, or some people say even a comet. And there was an anomaly in the skies. Something happened that caused them to pay attention. And they did. What would it take for us to pay attention to something really mind-boggling? Because I'm pretty certain we wouldn't be looking for a star that moved slowly. We would want something like fireworks, a big fanfare, maybe even this chorus of angels that we find in Luke. Because we have become so accustomed to the story of Jesus that we hardly pay attention anymore to the little details that make a difference. We hardly pay attention unless it is drawn to us in a really significant way. Luke spoke to the Jewish people, and he talks about the angels because he knows that's what would cause them to pay attention. But Matthew says no. This star in the east, this is what they paid attention to. They responded to this sign, as subtle as it was, and they followed it. And we have to think about what this would have entailed for them. This would have been an incredibly long journey. They were giving up everything to follow this star. Maybe they were giving up their households, maybe they were giving up their families, maybe they were giving up their wealth and putting everything into this journey to follow a hunch. They had to think that there was more to it. This was a life-altering moment for them. They used everything they had. They gave up everything they had to go on this journey. This was not a selloffvacations.com kind of moment. This was everything for them. They followed the star, which, if you think about it, means they were traveling at night. And by its very definition, it had to be more difficult. More difficult to see. They'd be tripping over things. I know I would. And they would be susceptible to the other people that come out at night. The thieves, the robbers, the bandits. Traveling at night was inherently more dangerous for them. And then they'd have to sleep during the day. Which, where are you going to find somewhere to sleep during the day where they don't think you're just a little odd for traveling only at night? People are going to think that you are one of the thieves or bandits. And so for them, this was not an easy journey. They would have been vulnerable. Any one of these things would cause us to take a little step back, wouldn't it? To give us a little pause, to leave our families, to leave our homes, to give up our wealth, to go on a journey where there was no destination set in mind, no guarantee of anything wonderful at the end, but a promise and a conviction that this was what they should be doing. They were not sure of what would lie at the end, but what they did know, and they say it right here, they say they were looking for the one who has been born King of the Jews. Not born to become King of the Jews, but born now to be King of the Jews. And here's where we get our first inkling, our first epiphany moment. Not born to become as a man, but born right now, this very moment, with his first breath, the King of the Jews. The prophecy fulfilled, the Messiah, the chosen one, the Christ, born a child. And maybe it's here in this second verse of the second chapter of Matthew that we get our first epiphany moment. The light bulb goes on for us. That this child is someone worth looking for, worth searching for, worth giving up some part of our lives for. But for them, there was still confusion. They went to Jerusalem. Because if you're going to go to find a king, where do you go find a king? In the capital city. They went to Jerusalem, they went to Herod, because if anyone would know where the king of the Jews was, it would be another king, right? That makes sense. Herod, of course, has no clue. None whatsoever. And he calls his go-to guys, his wise men, and he says, where is this King of the Jews to be born? And they knew. They knew the prophecies. They had the scriptures. They probably, if they were like all the others, these wise men, had seen the anomalies, had seen the signs, and they even knew where this Messiah would be. In Bethlehem in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. And yet, they did absolutely nothing about it. They hadn't told Herod before all this came to light. They had ignored the signs. They didn't want to get involved. And who could blame them? Because you know what? Herod was not known for being the kindest, gentlest soul. He had murdered his first wife, murdered his mother-in-law, murdered 3 of his sons, and then we know that he goes on to massacre Jewish babies under the age of 2, all of them. If you were one of his go-to guys, if you were one of his wise men, would you want to be the one to go to him and say, guess what? There's a king of the Jews born. Because we know what happens sometimes to the bearer of bad news. It took someone outside the realm to show them the truth, to bring the truth to light. And sometimes it's like that for us. Sometimes we need somebody outside ourselves, outside our circle even, to point us to something we haven't seen, to show us that moment, to give us that light bulb goes on, aha moment, that slap up the side, the head moment, where everything starts to make sense. And quite often these instances that we have, these aha moments, and I know we've all had them, it's usually when we're looking back at something and it starts to make a whole lot more sense. In hindsight, because we know hindsight is 20/20, right? And it's that moment where we start to have everything come together and we have the light bulb go on and that last piece of the puzzle slips into place and we see a different picture than what we had imagined. And then we have the opportunity to look at the whole picture and decide if it's going to change what we do in our lives. It's going to be an opportunity for us to look at something that's happened. Maybe it's a relationship that has gone awry. And we see maybe in that aha moment that the actions of that other person may not have been what we had originally thought. Maybe what they said wasn't intended to wound us. We just didn't have enough of the story that we could see that. Maybe what they did wasn't an attack on us, but they did the only thing that they could think to do at the time to change their lives. Maybe we don't see the whole picture because we choose not to, preferring to hang on to our version of events, preferring not to see, because then we would have to give up the hurts that we carried around for so long. When we have our epiphany moments, we have the opportunity to mend a relationship, to change how we interact with that person. And it could be life-altering. It could mean that we come to terms with an issue that has been bothering us for years. A choice that we made that didn't quite fit. A way of life that we know deep down isn't the best. So when we see, or when we have that slap upside the head, light bulb goes on, epiphany moment, what do? Do we hang on to what we knew, or do we address what we know? What difference does it make for us? Will it be the catalyst that changes the future trajectory of our lives? Many of you have heard me talk about my slap upside the head moment, where God said to me, I want you to be in ministry. And we fought, and I ignored God, and I didn't pay attention until I got it again. And then it made the biggest difference in my life. All of us have that moment. It may be small, it may be huge, it may be life-altering. Because we can choose to alter the course of our life, or not. We can choose to put the blinders on, like I said to the kids, and refuse to see. Because if we see it, we're going to have to do something about it, or not. When that light is shone on that moment, when that last piece of the puzzle is revealed to us, we may have to admit that we made a mistake. And none of us likes to admit that. We may have to admit that we should have done something differently, or not done something that we know we shouldn't have. Because if we see it, really, really see it, and choose to do something about it, we might have our life changed. And frankly, we don't like change. We like to stay very firmly where we are comfortable, where it feels right for us, even if it's wrong. We have life-changing moments. And when we're faced with them, we do have options as to how to deal with it. We can ignore them, pretend like it never happened, like Herod's men did. We can go along as we've always done, not let it affect our lives or our actions, because it's easier to do that than to change. It's simply easier to put it aside and not consider it and keep on doing what we've always done. But we'll never grow that way. We'll never be a bigger person that way. And you just know that it's going to come up again. Because there are no such thing as coincidences, only God moments. And I truly believe that these aha moments, these epiphany, light bulb goes on moments, are given to us by God to teach us, to remind us of His presence, and to give us an opportunity to change our lives, to change our mindsets, to choose instead of ignoring the past, to choose instead to unwrap it and to mull over it and to think about how this will develop a new meaning for our lives. And then we'll make those first steps towards growing ourselves. When that light bulb goes on for you, will you choose to remain in the dark? Or will you choose to use that light that God has provided? In the last few weeks, we've talked about the light that God has provided in Jesus Christ. He was born so that we could see the world and our lives with the light on. John 10 tells us that he was born that we might have life and we might have it more abundantly. And Ephesians says to us that by the power at work within us, he is able to accomplish abundantly more than we could ever ask for or imagine. When the light bulb goes on for you, what will you choose? To use that light that God has provided to change your life, to change your mindset, or to hit the switch and remain in darkness? It's your choice.